but let's dive into this. Hopefully they'll come on soon. Okay, so I'm gonna share a PowerPoint. Okay, so welcome to Radar. This is going to be an online course. We'll be meeting Zoom every week for the next 8 weeks, and I teach a few different navigation classes for OCC for the non-credit students, the community programs. But this is my first time teaching for the credit courses and using Canvas. So that's kind of my caveat that Canvas might, I'm hoping everything works out on Canvas, but I am learning it. You guys are probably much better at navigating Canvas than I am. But yeah, this is Radar. So we'll be doing Zoom each week here, and it's the same link. So the link is on the Canvas page, but it's the same one that you use each time. I have PowerPoints that I'll use as well as talking with you guys. And then I also have, I'll show you guys right here, the document camera with the Radar plotting sheets that I'll be using to go over step-by-step things. So we'll be using, sometimes I use the whiteboard to draw out my thoughts. I use the whiteboard a lot in in-person classes, but we'll be doing document camera, PowerPoint, and talking. And I'll also, these are being recorded. So if you miss a class, you're welcome to look at it on the recordings as well. So hopefully that makes things a little bit easier. I know it's a crazy year for us all. For homework, there are assignments on Canvas that I have designated as homework, but a lot of our homeworks are going to be using this kind of plotting sheets. So it's hard to like make an assignment. So really all I have as the assignment is to just put the date in that you finished it, and that's it. So I won't be grading your homework or anything like that. It's, you know, to your own benefit. The more you practice, the better you'll get, and the more understanding you'll have of the concepts we're going to be covering. So that's for our homework. We'll have 3 quizzes, and for the quizzes, you can use your notes, whatever materials you want to use. It's just kind of a practice structure of what the final exams are going to be. So on the last day of class, we'll have the finals, which is 3 parts: the radar theory, which we're going to cover mostly the first 2 weeks, and then we cover little bits on like the rest of it, but mostly the first 2 weeks will be our radar theory, and that'll be a multiple choice exam, and those are Coast Guard questions. I don't know if you guys have taken Coast Guard exams in your other classes. They're pretty standard multiple choice questions, and they're usually phrased in a frustrating way, but that's classic Coast Guard questions. And then we'll do 2 paper plot exams. So I'll be grading those with the as the final exam. The other part of it is, which we unfortunately aren't doing with this distant learning, is the simulator plots. So the other part of the whole radar class is simulator plots, and when you've seen little targets or pips on the screen, how to identify them and maneuver around them, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, we can't do that with our constraints that's going on right now. So, so we won't be getting a Coast Guard approval, or you won't be getting the Coast Guard endorsement for this class. So if you do want to get the Coast Guard endorsement, you can take it with someone, or hopefully once we get everything approved, we'll hold an abbreviated version or a 5-day version of this class, and you guys will zoom right through it. You'll know, it'll be a lot easier for you. Sometimes that 5-day class can be brutal because it's just a ton of information back to back, but it'll be a lot easier for you guys with taken this course beforehand. I wanted to show you Canvas, how I've set up Canvas a little bit differently than maybe some of your other classes. So I have, let's just start with Zoom link. Hopefully you guys found the Zoom link. For our modules, you have the Zoom link, and then for PowerPoints, I have for each week the PowerPoint that we'll be using. And then I also have, starting week 3, we have practice plots that we're going to use in class. So if you could have those, printed out or on a tablet or computer or however you look at things, just have them available so I can be referencing them and you'll understand, you can follow along. So for each week, kind of what we're doing is the PowerPoints and then the practice. And then down here, I have the homeworks. So you keep going down, and then we'll have the quizzes, and then we'll have our final exams. And then at the very bottom is the reference material. So this is kind of those little cheat sheets or step-by-step guides, little things that you guys can use to help you during this class. So course material, kind of a list on course material, my video on nav tools. Hopefully you guys have taken nav or some kind of nav course that you're familiar with nav tools. I do suggest getting the radar plotting sheets. I have a PDF here on the reference material that you could print out, but it's shrunken down if you print it out on printer paper. So if you have it bigger, it's a little bit easier to work with. So I suggest those are available on Amazon, but they're also sold at the Boathouse store. And yeah, so I wanted to make sure you guys saw scroll down far enough to see the reference material. But other than that, that's how my Canvas is kind of organized. So any questions on how the class is set up and what you guys are getting out of it?
What did you say that those sheets were called? So if I do want to purchase some of those at the Boathouse?
Radar plotting sheets.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do some introductions. My name is Bree. You can call me Captain Bree, Captain Bree, whatever you want. I'm very flexible. I have my unlimited master's license. I graduated from the California Maritime Academy about, 11 years ago, and started working right away as an AB and worked my way up. I was last sailing about 3-4 years ago as a chief mate on a research vessel. So my favorite thing that I worked on was research vessels. I kind of went back and forth, research, container ships, research, oil rigs, research, and I absolutely love research vessels, but I do have some experience on a few others as well. I taught up in Seattle for a little bit, and then I've been teaching with OCC for about 2 years. I teach the non-credit students, so the community classes. I teach Coastal Nav 1 and 2, Celestial Navigation, and then I do the weekend workshops of like rules of the road and intro into chart plotting or nav. So and now I'm teaching a radar class. Again, I don't usually teach radar, but I had things set up in my little home office here to do distance learning, so they popped this class over to me. But I have a lot of radar experience for sure, used it on every vessel that I was on, and I'm excited to teach this class with you guys. So I'll want to go around. I'll stop the share. And if we could just introduce ourselves, what name you'd like to be called, what kind of boating experience you have, what kind of radar experience you have, maybe you have boating experience but not radar experience, and then what you're hoping to get out of this course. So if we could just go around, I know it's weird to go around with Zoom, so I guess I'll just call on your name. And I think a few of you guys know each other in some other classes, but I'm new here, so let's start with Sabrina.
Hi everyone, I'm Sabrina. I know some of you guys know me from the other classes. I don't have a ton of experience with boating, just a little bit. I had like a friend who had a tiara. We would go to Catalina and back, but never like worked on any boats or anything of that nature. Grew up water skiing, but not like, I just feel like I'm not as experienced as a lot of other people that are in my classes. So, but I've already learned so much in all those other classes with Captain Perlow. What I hope to get out of this class is, well, honestly, it's for the Professional Mariners program, which is the program that I'm in. So I know absolutely nothing about radar. And I just signed up for the class last night because I just found out yesterday as I was telling Captain Bree. So yeah, I'm ready to learn and I'm excited, but I don't even really know what to ask for out of this class because I've never taken anything with radar. So again, I'm Sabrina and I like to be called Sabrina. So that's all I have.
Have you seen a radar on board any of?
Yeah, kind of, but I don't know anything about.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Cool. And Joseph.
Brand spanking new. So.
Gotcha.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joseph. I can go by Joe, Joey, or Joseph, whatever you prefer. I have to respond to all three. Boating experience, I work for Catalina Express, so I've got a decent amount. Radar, not so much. Hence why I'm taking this class also to complete the Mariners program with OCC.
Did they use a radar on board the Catalina Express? I know they have to have one.
Yeah.
But yeah. You're not in the wheelhouse, or?
No, I'm a deckhand.
You're a deckhand. Okay. Cool. Very cool. Well, welcome. All right, Captain Kev.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Joseph. Hey, Sabrina. So I'm Captain Kevin McQuiston. I'm a full-time charter sailboat captain with Sunglow Sailing in Long Beach. I take bougie women out day drinking Chardonnay on weekdays for 3 hours at a time. It's the best job on the planet. I do deliveries for 3 different yacht brokers, and that was what kept me going during the beginning days of the quarantine. I'm enrolled in the Professional Mariner program after not being in college for 35 years because I'm old AF. And Joseph knows and Sabrina knows, anybody that wants to accumulate sea time in this class or learn how to sail, I offer free sailing to all my classmates for sea time. I'll document it for you. And if you just want to learn how to sail, Sabrina and some of our other classmates are going tomorrow. Sabrina, you totally undersell your skill set. Sabrina has become a very competent sailor. She may not have the confidence, but she definitely has the skills, and you're going to be at the helm all day tomorrow. So
thanks.
And I will put my, everybody's got my email in the chat. I'll put my phone. Seriously, like every Wednesday, I'm taking OCC students out for free, and I'll teach as much as you feel like learning, or you can just day drink Chardonnay like bougie white women on Manhattan Beach. So, and I'm sorry, Captain Bennett, my hope is to get, I have a master license that I'm hoping to upgrade tonnage wise this year, but I'd really like to get my radar observer rating at some point. I'm glad I'm getting college credit, and hopefully we'll figure out something next year for Coast Guard. And
For sure,
yeah,
for
that's it.
sure. So do you use a radar on your charter?
I don't. My work boat's in Newport 33. I use my iPad or my phone or my watch for chart plotting. I've got AIS app on there too, and I've got NOAA. So I'm constantly looking, but my next boat will most definitely have radar on it.
Gotcha. Sounds good. Okay. And I'm not going to pronounce your name very well. Marie-Luz?
Yeah, just call me Lucy. It's a little bit easier.
Lucy, okay.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be my second time taking this class. I took it years ago with Ron Mealy, but the problem is because it's Coast Guard, if you miss one class but you pass everything else, you won't get your certificate. So I'm taking it again as like a refresher for that because I'm trying to just add it as an endorsement to my license. I'm currently a female captain for USC. I've completed the First Mariner program about 3 years ago. I have my own yacht, grew up in the Caribbean sailing with the family, so I have a little bit of experience with long distance. I also work for Catalina Express on the weekends, and during the week I work for USC.
Cool. And do you use a radar on any of those?
Yeah, basically every boat, they all use radar.
Okay, cool. Very cool. So you did mention you didn't get the endorsement last time. Unfortunately, you aren't going to get the endorsement this time either. Just so you know that ahead of time. I'm sorry, but that's the way our approval goes. It has to be in person and on the simulator. So, all right. Let's see. Let's go with Odila. Does anyone know how to say her name? His name? Odelia? All right, how about Louise doesn't have a mic working today, but he said he would introduce himself in the chat. Hello. All right, took sailing class, OCC 2 years ago. Gonna try it again. No radar experience. Okay, new to radar. So Lucy is really the only one that we have has some radar experience. So, all right, well, thanks, Louise. And I guess our other person isn't really here. All right. Well, welcome to class, and feel free to jump in with any comments along the way. A lot of times when I'm on PowerPoint, I just see my little face. So if you're waving at me or nodding or something, I probably won't be able to see that. So just holler out something at me. You could stay on mute. You don't have to have your video on. You're welcome to have it on. I like seeing your guys' faces. Yeah, definitely holler at me anytime with any questions along the way. And we're going to go back to our PowerPoint. Okay, cool. So we are going to be talking about marine radars. And you might see them on different vessels in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, different capacities, different frequencies along the way. But they all kind of do the same basic thing. So we're going to be talking about the basics of a radar. So radar stands for radio detection and excuse me, radio detection and ranging. So it was invented before World War II, but it kind of became very popular and used frequently and kind of in a more military or commercial way in World War II. And now it's on all commercial vessels and widely used throughout the maritime industry. So we want to
was radio frequency detection like the precursor to radar?
Yes, and a radio frequency is what emanates, whatever the word I'm looking for, what we transmit on the radar. So we're going to be talking about, it's a very, very fast moving radio frequency. But the basic concept is like an echo. If you throw out a sound wave or radio frequency or some sort of wave, it hits a solid object and bounces back, we can time that with our basic, 60D Street formulas of what the speed of frequency that was traveling at, how long did it take, and then we could say, what is that range or what is that distance that object is away from me? So it's kind of like your Doppler when you're looking at depth sounder. It's just this basic echo frequency. Now, of course, it's way more high tech than just a basic echo frequency. But if we just think about the limits of what a basic echo can do, those really show us the limits of what a radar, a high-tech marine radar can do. So it's just this burst of electromagnetic energy that hit something and come back, and we could measure that distance. Now, this is moving incredibly fast as we have like a highly directional beams that we're sending out. Those sweep, you might see it on a radar sweep in like a movie or something where there's a little heading flasher that will sweep around. That sweeps around approximately 15 times a second. 15 times a minute, sorry, not a second, that would be way fast. 15 times a minute. And the pulse frequencies that go out are in like millionths of a second. So they can go out about 9 pulses per one little degree, and then 9 pulses per the other degree as it's moving around. So that's how we find the direction or bearing, or we use time to find our distance. What was your question, Captain?
How fast is that, like in miles per hour, does that signal go out?
I'm going to have that exact slide because I'm not going to say the number. Let me see if I can have it.
Sorry, I'm probably going to ask you a lot of questions that you're going to get to in like 45 seconds. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have the speed on here. It's speed of light, essentially.
The thing that bothers me the most about radar is how does it know it's a signal coming back, and what if there's nothing to reflect and that signal just dead ends? And I'm sure you're going to get to that, but it keeps me up at night.
Yes, that the frequency will eventually just dissipate, just like an echo in sound, right? It eventually just fades. It gets weaker and weaker and weaker and just dissipates. That being said, when an object hits, when the electromagnetic energy hits something and then comes back, it comes back way, way, way weaker than it did when it went out. right? So it's this very, very weak thing. And then we put it into our receiver, which amplifies it so that we can change that very weak pip or signal into something that we could see on the screen. Okay, so what are our fundamentals of a radar? So on board, it's an instrument that we use for collision avoidance. So that's, you know, having us not hit other vessels out there. So whether they're stationary buoys, whether they're moving commercial vessels or small little skiffs or sailboats, we want to be able to use this radar for collision avoidance. Second, we use it for navigation. So especially if you're making landfall at night in fog, you can't see, you can use a radar to help you navigate. So if you can't see those aids to navigation, but you can see through the fog, essentially, the curve of the land or raycons or other sort of aids to navigation based on radar, that will help us navigate. And then the last one is that it really helps us with our situational awareness. And I'm sure you've heard that word a million times in your other classes, but situational awareness is very important to the Coast Guard and very important to sailing and being out on the water, that we have to be managing all of these different things all at the same time. So we need to know where we are. We need to know where other boats are. We need to know, you know, what's our draft, what's going on board. We're having, if you're in a wheelhouse, you might have like 5 or 6 different screens just putting data in your brain. You need to be able to process this and have this situational awareness so you won't get tunnel visioned into one little thing. So a lot of times they say, just look out the window. But you want to use all of those tools to your advantage so you have better situational awareness, that you can understand what's going on. And if one thing goes out, you can you know, use others to assist you, that you're not just dependent on one tool, whatever that tool is. If it's your phone, if it's your AIS, if it's the radar, whatever it is, you want all of these things in balance so that you're situationally aware. So yeah, we're going to be talking about situational awareness a lot. Have you guys heard of that term in your other classes? Okay, cool. Let's click. Okay, so this is kind of what a radar screen, if you're looking at just a radar screen, will look like. So maybe you haven't seen one of these before, but they're basically sending out frequencies from your vessel. So unless you're offset on your screen, you are always in the center and everything around you is projected outwards. And the thing with a radar, one of the big limiting factors, is that it only gets projected until the point that it echoes back. So essentially we can't see behind that curve, or we can't see behind that mountain or that jetty if it's just going to one. If we're right next to a car carrier or something, all we're going to see is that car carrier, and we can't see anything on the other side. So it's building this image, I guess, of what's projected around us, but then we can't go further than that. So that's why I like this picture here. But essentially we are seeing in the fog or the darkness. So if you guys have studied rules of the road, you know how lights help you a lot with identifying the aspect of a vessel, what the vessel is doing, where the vessel is going. But it is hard to tell at night where that vessel is, right? If you just see that red light or just see those 2 white lights, telling distance can be very deceiving. If the light is dim or bright, where the radar helps us see in the dark and helps us identify how far away is that boat. I can see it, but telling distance can be very challenging. Or in fog. Or, yeah, mostly it's just fog and darkness. And a lot of a lot of recreational boaters won't even turn on their radar unless it's foggy or dark. They just leave it off. But I would say, in my opinion, it's good to have it on and be able to identify things. Oh, that's a moving vessel. That's a buoy. That's the coast in, sun bright, peaceful conditions. So if you get into a sticky situation and you're dependent on that radar, you're not looking at it for the first time trying to decipher what's what. So you want to be comfortable with it if you have one on board. The other thing is assisting with navigation. We will have, I think it's week 5 or 6, a whole lecture on navigating with radar. So very quick way to get ranges and bearings, using parallel indexing to keep you on track. Very quick and easy tools to use for navigation. Any questions?
Captain, is there anything modern radar lacks that you think it should have? Like, does it tie into your autopilot, so if there's a collision alert, it'll veer off course?
Yes. There are tons of overlays. So a lot of people just use a like an electronic plotter of some sorts, an ECDIS, some sort of electronic plotter. You can overlay the radar, you can overlay AIS, you can overlay your depth sounder, you can overlay as GPS, you can put as much kind of inputs into, your primary screen, if you will. But you definitely want to have, they're all independent things. So kind of like what you put into it, you get out of it. So if what you're putting into it is bad information, it's going to give you bad information. So
do you have an optimal range when you're at, like, say it's your watch? Do you have a distance that you like it to show?
Yes. On commercial vessels, we have 2 radars. There's a redundancy issue. You need to have 2. We'll have one on a 12-mile scale and one on a 24-mile scale. If we are closer, making an approach, maybe it's 12 and 6. Just depending on where you are. But typically 12 and 24. So legal aspects of radar. If you are a passenger ship of any kind, so if you're that, Catalina Express, or you're doing charters, I guess not if you're doing charters because you don't have one. I
was just going to ask you, I'm sorry to interject. So I'm on a Newport 33. We have chart plotter, but we don't have radar. We operate, even though I have a master license, we only operate up to 6 passengers. Do you think legally we should have radar?
I think yes. If you're carrying paying passengers, then legally you do need a radar.
Yeah, I'm going to bring that up tomorrow.
I would look into that, but in my opinion, I would say yes, you do. Again, I am not a recreational boater. All of my experience has been in the commercial industry. So a lot of this recreational things I have been learning over the past 2 or 3 years. But yeah, that's my caveat that we'll go over for a lot of class. If you're over a certain tonnage, you need a radar. And if you're carrying passengers, you need a radar, is essentially what the rules are. And then even if you have a radar, you still need to know how to use it. You need to know the fundamentals of radar, operation, safety, and what it means, that analysis. So you're like, oh, I just see all this green dots. I don't know what it means. That's what we're going to focus on a lot in this class, is understanding what the radar is telling us and how we can use that to better our situational awareness. So even if we have it on board, we need to know how to use it. So that is key. Basic, very, very basic components is we have to have a power source. So if you have two radars, a lot of times that power source has to be an independent power source, just focused on the radar itself. It can't be, you know, plugging in your iPhone or plugging in all these other things. It needs to have its own individual power supply. It has to have some sort of display. And again, it can be, you know, a small display with a couple buttons, not like some big screen with a keyboard. It can be a very small display for those smaller recreational boats. And then you have to have some sort of antenna that can basically transmit and receive the radar signals. So those are your basic components. Again, there's a lot more complex things, which we're going to dive into, but yeah, this is our basics. So again, our scanner or our antenna, it's typically moving around, sends out a pulse and waits. So out of the time, and this is like microseconds, millionths of a second, it sends out a pulse and then it waits, and it has a much longer waiting period, basically listening or waiting for that signal to come back before it sends out another signal. So that's what limits your distance or your maximum capacity for a radar, are, you know, about 24 miles, maybe even 20 miles would be, depending on the height of your radar and the horizon of how far that radar can see things.
Captain, does the computation just take into account the time on the echo, or does it take in the strength also?
The time of the echo and the strength?
Yeah, so I mean, it's making a computation. We sent out a ping. It took this long to come back. The target is that far.
Yes.
Does it also take into account how strong the return was?
Yes, yes. And you'll see on the radar, like what a very strong return looks like and what a very faint return looks like. One of my tricks or tips for that is having your, it's called trails, and it's kind of the history, and it's shown in a different color. So if you see a blip coming up, like one radar scan, and then it wasn't there the next one, and then it was there the other one, then it missed two, and then it was there, you could kind of see a history of, okay, it's not giving me a solid return, but I think something's there that I need to start tracking or be aware of.
Would that be like a squall or something, maybe?
Could be a squall, could be a small, you know, not reflective object like a sailboat. It could be a lot of different things. Could just be a swell. Could be an infinite amount of things.
And I apologize for being like the chatty Cathy of the question group here. So those little reflectors that I have on my sailboat, they really work?
Yes. Yes, they do. They are reflecting things. And so I was gonna say the other thing you'll see a lot out there are crab pots. A lot of times the crab pots have a little stick with a little radar thing that you'll be getting reflections from. So, and you kind of see the history of it if you have that trails on, where if you have no trails on or trails for like 1 minute or something, things are coming up and disappearing and coming up and disappearing. And it's really hard to focus and get that situational awareness.
if you don't mind me asking, what was the strangest target ping in out thing you ever experienced?
I would say in the radar world, we picked up a SART in like the middle of the Pacific. We were going from Boston to Greece, and there was nothing out there. And then there was a SART. I was like, that's definitely a SART on the radar, but there was nothing out there. So it was real eerie, like something sunk, and we ended up picking it up. We found it, and it was just a SART that kept going for like, had a lot of growth on it. It had been there for a long time, floating around, but it just kept pinging out that radar signal, and that was a little weird. Louise asked, how does a radar differ from sonar? So it's very, very similar in that I guess that when I think of sonar, I'm not an expert in sonar, I'm thinking of like a depth sounder, where that isn't as directional. That's just down and up. When I was on a research vessel, we did a lot of, we called it multi-beam or tracking of the ocean bottom. And we had big array, but it didn't move. It would just moved with the vessel that would go down to the sea floor and bounce back up and down and bounce back up, where a radar is continually moving. So it's sending out this directional beam. So again, 1 degree, right? There's 360 degrees in a circle to go all the way around the vessel. 1 degree has about 9 pulses. And the pulse consists of a pulse going out in like microseconds, and then a wait for that pulse to come back and give us an echo. If we don't have an echo, nothing was there. But that happens 9 times for 1 little degree, all the way around. So we're sending lots of different signals in a direction so that we can get that bearing and that range, where I'm pretty sure sonar really just focuses on range, not as close to bearings. Could totally be wrong on that. I'm not an expert in sonar, but that's what I'm thinking. That's my initial answer. Okay, let's see. What's next? Okay, so this is a more detailed kind of box diagram of what these signals are doing. So we're going to talk about each one independently, but first we have our power supply, and then our modulator. From the power supply, we're getting power. Our modulator is kind of the ruler of time. It sets the time on our display. It sets the time for our transmitter. It kind of says how quickly are we going to have these pulses? What is our pulse frequency rate? And it synchronizes it all so that we can have everything synchronized and not just sending out and getting a bunch back. It kind of times it so it cleanly works, if that makes sense. The transmitter is what creates that electronic frequency, that pulse, the radio frequency, and it shoots it up into the antenna, which then directionally shoots it out. And this little tubes, these TR tubes, is what has the, I kind of think of it as like a valve, like maybe a one-way valve on, in like your ballast tanks or something, that it's letting the electronic pulse out, and then it closes, and the receiver one opens so that it has that pause and able to receive the echoes that come back. And then once it's in the receiver, it gets amplified and sent to whatever sort of display you have. So those TR tubes have to be synchronized with this modular, right, in order to time everything perfectly. The way the modern technology works, I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but it's pretty amazing. But that's kind of like basic concepts of it, if you will. And again, that pulse that is going out is a very strong pulse. The pulse that comes back is a very weak pulse that in the receiver, we sometimes have an amplifier there that gets amplified to a bigger frequency so that we can see it on the display, whatever display unit that we have.
Captain, so even with all our digital technology, this is essentially an analog system that's still viable in a digital age?
Essentially, yes. I mean, I volunteer sometimes on the Lane Victory, and their radar screen is like, you look into the black cone and it's very analog. I mean, modern radars are not, they're very digital when you're looking at them, but essentially the technology is still very analog. But I mean, when you're looking at it, it doesn't look, I mean, modern ones at least, yeah. Okay, any big questions on this little diagram here? Did I kind of explain it? All right. So I kind of combined a couple different PowerPoints, so they repeat a lot. So I'm just gonna skip that one. Again, you could go back to this. They're all on the PDF if you want to read through them. But let's talk about each one individually on these slides. So the modulator was kind of that ruler of time, right? It controls the time for each pulse going out and synchronizes everything so it all works together. It establishes that pulse repetition rate of how fast it's going to go out and come back. So when you think modulator, think time. It's the ruler of time. Your transmitter is what actually generates that electronic energy, and then it sends it out. The antenna system is what sends it out directionally, so that the antenna is timed by the modulator of how quickly it's turning and how quickly it's sending these pulses out. Again, very highly directional so that we can get an accurate bearing and range. The receiver is what amplifies those weak signals that come back to us. And we have different controls, our gain, our tuning, our C clutter, our rain clutter, on how to amplify those weak signals that come back to us. So we could kind of fine tune our radar to see what is coming back. Okay. The duplexer transmits echoes from the antenna receiver. So that's just another tool up there on the transmitter receiver. Your indicator is just that video display. And then you have your power supply. Here's that answer, Kevin. We have radio frequency travels at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second.
Captain, so air and like density and atmospherics have no bearing whatsoever on it?
I would say no. It can, see through that fog. It can see through that those changes. I mean,
so it
I don't
operates
know
like...
how it would be if you were in an airplane and had a much different pressure, but typically you're at sea level in the maritime environment.
Actually, I think I just answered my own question. It acts like light, not like sound.
Correct. It acts like light. It's the speed of light. Yes. The angular measurements are clockwise from true north or from the heading of your vessel, which I think we'll talk about in week 4, is the different types of head up, north up, stabilized, unstabilized, different sort of ways we can set up our radar. But yeah, it's always measured clockwise, so you always see it moving around. The electromagnetic waves are your typical wave, has your typical wave characteristics. Your crests, your troughs, your wavelength. I guess I don't have wavelength on here, but we can move through that. The frequency is going to be measured in how fast that wave moves with time. So I'm going to go through here. We have high frequency where you get a lot of wavelengths in a period of time. So here we have 1 second. No, why does it say 1 second? Anyways, this is 1 unit. You have 1 wavelength. And here in that same distance, you have 3 wavelengths. So you have this lower frequency and higher frequency. And there are pros and cons to each, a lower and a high frequency. So the 2 basic ones that we're going to talk about are, they call it X band or S band. So the X band is the 3 centimeter radar. So this is something to remember here. You have an X band radar. It's also called 3 centimeters. And then its frequency is 9,000 megahertz. Your S band is a 10 centimeter radar with the frequency of 3,000 megahertz. Those 3s can get very confusing. S band 10, 3,000 megahertz. X band 3 centimeters, 9,000 megahertz. Go back to the slide or highlight it. It's, you want to know the difference.
Captain, higher frequencies are more subject to attenuation scattered by the atmosphere. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
So it is, we're going to go to this one. There's pros and cons for each. So when you're looking at the X-band radar, it's more of your harbor, your close range radar. You can see your Raycons and your SARTs using your X-band, and your S-band is more for deep ocean sailing, used in choppier weather, so it's not as affected by that sea clutter or that rain clutter. This is a better one I have here. So your long range detection is going to be better with the higher, or it's actually lower frequency, right? 3 megahertz, but it is a higher wavelength, your 10 centimeter or your S band. Different people in the industry that you'll talk to might just call it a 10 or a 3, or they'll call it an S and an X is typically S band or X band, or 10 centimeter, 3 centimeter. So your 10 centimeter is a lot better in the rain. It's not affected by those clutter, but you'll see more of those little things on your X band. You'll see those smaller things when you're closer to, when you're, coastal navigating, that you'll want to see the smaller boats that come up. You might be more dependent on your X band. When you're out in open ocean, you're typically more dependent on your S band. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It also kind of reminds me, my dad used to have, I think they're illegal, but like radar detectors, you know, like in your vehicle to detect like policemen. And I remember when it would go off, it would say X band, K band. So
Okay.
it makes sense why, like, it never said S band though, because maybe because you said that that one's like for more further. So maybe the S bands were never on, but that's, you know, like those radar detectors you can have in your car.
Yes, and that's that frequency, right? That it's
Okay.
detecting.
Like when you said X band, I was like, I remember hearing that because it would go off and it would say X band. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if that helps anyone, but it helped me because then to decipher between X band and S band.
Yeah. Cool. So the Raycon detection and SART detection on the X band. So Raycon is a buoy that has basically a radio frequency identifier on it, so that you can identify that buoy. It's typically your sea buoy or your safe watermark on an approach to a harbor. Sometimes we'll call it a pilot buoy. Lots of different little things. So that Raycon buoy will send out a Morse code, and I'll have some pictures here that you'll see what the Raycon looks like on board. Where a SART is a search and rescue transponder. So that is kind of like, there's two different kind of emergency transponders that are typically used. One's called an EPIRB, and that uses GPS frequency, or kind of, it sends out your GPS position to the satellites, and then it tells whoever you're registered that you are in distress. Where a SART is identified, radar transmit has to hit the SART itself for it to transmit back, and that also produces a very unique image on the radar screen. So it's a sort of distress mechanism that if you were in distress, you could you always want to bring your SART with you in your life raft or your lifeboat, so that people can see you. Okay. General advantages of radar. Again, situational awareness. We're going to say it a lot. Collision avoidance. So determining if there's risk of collision. Has everyone here taken, or who has not taken rules of the road?
Is that an actual course? I have not.
I don't know.
I mean,
have you talked about rules of the road in any of your other classes?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Like maybe a little bit. I could be wrong, but I feel like, yeah, like rules of the road. I've heard.
Anyway.
But is there a course called Rules of the Road?
I teach a workshop on it. I have a course on it, but
I've not taken that.
With the credit course, with the credit in the college, I am unfamiliar with the professional maritime program.
Okay.
My whole focus has been non-credit students. So
I think boating and seamanship is where they cover rules of the road.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I know that the program exists, but I don't know what is covered in each one. So yeah, that's why I'll keep asking you, have you guys done this or not? I don't exactly know what level we're at. Okay, so collision avoidance is the main thing that we're going to be focusing on in this class. And when we see those blips on the radar, and we can identify that, hey, that's something I should be looking at. Is there risk of collision? Do I need to navigate? Am I a stand-on vessel or am I a give-way vessel? How can I see what's going on in this situation? So identifying risk of collision is huge. And that's what we're going to focus on. But it enables the mariner to take necessary action before we get into a dangerous situation. So a lot of times, so there's basic radar, and then there's kind of the modern, I don't know, computer software that goes on top of your radar is called an ARPA. And we're going to talk about that in one of our lectures. But the ARPA basically tells us what we're going to be doing with our paper plots and our paper, or what you would be doing on the simulator is what the ARPA does in like seconds for you. So again, what we're doing is kind of an outdated thing because most radars have ARPAs. And with that ARPA, you could even do trial maneuvers. So you could say, hey, these are all these vessels around me, this is where they're moving, and I've like acquired these targets, I know their course and direction, I know my course and direction. If I turn to the right 20 degrees, how is this going to change? And you could actually do that on if you have an ARPA on top of your radar. So it really is a great tool to help you make these decisions of what course do I need to change to in order to get a 2 mile, 3 mile CPA. What are my options? And I can see it in real time. So it's a great tool for that. Now we're going to learn how to do that by paper, but ARPA is a great tool. And then lastly, the big advantage is radar, or navigation for radar, that we can get very quick 2 lines of position, a bearing and a range, by just one aid to navigation or one point of land that we can quickly get those simultaneous LOPs and plot them. So it's a great tool for navigation. Again, we could use it at night or reduced visibility. It's very hard to tell those distances at night. Let's see. Fixes obtains from a single object. Okay, we talked about that. Disadvantages of a radar. We have it's a mechanical system. So it is definitely subject to mechanical and electronic failures. It definitely has its own limitations, both how far it can see away from you and how far it can see minimum distance. It might not be able to see that sailboat that's coming up right next to you, but it can see kind of further out. So it definitely has its limitations. Correctly interpreting the display. So that's the big one that we're going to be learning about in this class, is correctly identifying, which targets are concerns. Where's the risk of collision? What are we going to be, how can I interpret this to my advantage? And how can I use this to help my situational awareness? Other disadvantages is that it's not as effective in the rain. So when we see those squalls and there's a little tiny sailboat inside the squalls, that sailboat's going to be hard to see. When you have small objects hidden by other reflective things like water, it can be very hard to see. So it does give us this tool to like see through the fog and see through the dark, see through the rain, but it does have its limits. It's not perfect. It is just a mechanical tool that we need to know what the limits are of it and how we can tune our radar to best account for those. Needs a clean source of power. This is kind of repetitive. Okay. The situational awareness methodology. I don't know if you guys have done this in other classes, but your kind of cycle of your situational awareness is to always have a plan, whether it's your voyage plan or your plan of what you're going to do with this vessel approaching you. Who's give way, who's stand on. Have a plan in place and not just kind of be flying by the seat of your pants. And then execute that plan. And then C, monitor and revise. Did the plan or whatever you had actually work? Was the outcome that you had intended happening? So monitor and revise it, appraise it. Does it need, more assistance? Do I need a better CPA? Am I getting too close to land? Am I drifting inshore? Appraise what's going on and then have a plan. So it's kind of this cycle that we go back, or, what we're always doing. We're taking all that information in the wheelhouse. We're taking our depth sounder, our radar, our ECDIS, our ARPA, our AIS. We're taking all this in together and going through this in our head constantly. Okay. This is what a radar overlay. This is an example of a radar overlay. So how I was saying, we might have a bunch of different screens. A lot of modern systems can be combined into one, and we can overlay things that both checks to see if our chart plotter is lined up or adjusted correctly, and it checks to see that our radar, are we looking at land? Are we looking at a buoy? Is that, a bunch of moored vessels because they're in a mooring area? It really helps identify what's on the radar screen as well as what's on the chart plotter. The other thing that we get overlaid that is very helpful is the AIS. Has anyone used an AIS before?
I don't know what that stands for.
Okay. It is an automatic identification system.
Sorry, you guys were covering that part because let me move the people. I didn't even see that. Sorry.
No,
I see it.
So your AIS, if you use, a lot of people use like marine traffic app on your phone. That is AIS, and it is a VHF signal that you have on board that is emitting your vessel's information. So it is emitting your vessel's name, your identification system. It's identifying a lot of times where you're going, what type of vessel you are, what's your navigation status. Are you underway? Are you moored? Are you anchored? Are you a research vessel? Are you a tanker? Are you a container ship, passenger vessel? Where are you going? It has just all this information that is super helpful. If you're out there and you see somebody on radar, you see a blip and you want to call them on the radio or ask them something, you don't have to say, hey, motorboat that's south of Long Beach, this is the white boat off of your bow, or like something general. You can literally call them by name and then say your name as so they can pipe up, oh, I just heard my name on the radio if someone's trying to contact me. So it's incredibly helpful for that collision avoidance and having that plan in place, because you can it enables talking to people. And I always say, as a commercial boater, I would suggest recreational boaters getting AIS on board, because you'll see in this little guy, this is the symbol, this little triangle that pops up if you have an AIS. And it doesn't matter if you are a little tiny sailboat or you're a mega yacht or a container ship or a tanker. It's the same little AIS symbol. So it really pops up, even if you don't have, a good radar return coming back, that little AIS target will be there to kind of tell one of those big commercial boats, hey, there's something here we need to be aware of. And then you can see here on this side of the radar screen, it says AIS-A, which here's C. I don't know exactly where A is. Oh, it's off the chart. Yeah, AASC is the only one that we see, but it gives us the name. So this one's Ariel Lacine, MMSI number, its position, nav status, it's at anchor. This one is underway using engines. It gives us CPA, what their true course is, what their true speed is, etc. So it gives us a lot of information. The other thing I like is that it will, if you click on it, typically, it will give you that destination. So especially if you are, you know, in Catalina and there's someone coming out, are they going to be going north to San Francisco? Are they going down to Mexico or something? It kind of lets you know, it helps with that, hey, this guy's going to be, you know, hanging a right or hanging a left right in front of me, to kind of give that more situational awareness and to be predictable. So I talk about that a lot in Rules of the Road. You always want to be predictable and not have someone guessing what you're doing. You want to be predictable, I guess. Again, with AIS, most military vessels don't use it. And here off Camp Pendleton, in San Diego, there's a lot of military vessels around. So you will get radar blips on the screen that won't have that little AIS overlay if that's what you're looking for. But the other cool thing with AIS is that it's not limited by this radar where you only see up to the point where something is bouncing back. You can see behind the turn of the channel, or you can see behind the large, you know, car carrier. There might be some small boats behind them, and it's using the VHF and GPS to give you that display. It's not using the radio frequencies. So both advantages and disadvantages to that radar and AIS. Okay, so I guess these are some examples. Again, this is a radar screen. It is offset. So if you could see the our vessel, the vessel that we're on here, is not at the center of the screen. We're offset a little bit. And that's, you can see that we're not going. Our speed is not much, but typically, if you're a very fast moving vessel, you have it offset to ahead of you so that you could see things ahead of you. If you're very fast moving, you're not as concerned with things coming up and overtaking you.
Captain, does that mean your pin drop is like farther down on the circle?
Your pin drop, what do you mean by that? Oh, you're muted. Captain Kev, you're muted. I can't.
Oh, sorry about that. Where you're at is dead center in the circle. Are you saying the circle shifts north?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Typically, you will see a radar screen with you in the center and everything's even around you, but you can offset it so you can see further ahead of you and not as far behind you. And typically that's done with fast vessels, fast moving vessels. Okay, so this one I wanted to show you. So this is what all these little blips would look like on your basic radar screen. That you don't know if it's a buoy, is it an anchorage? I could kind of see that that one's moving just because it has that history, that trails behind it. But if it doesn't have trails on, all you're going to see are these little yellow blips. So if you're looking at the whole screen, it can be very confusing of what's moving, what's not. Oh, and this right here, the thing that's kind of in the center of the screen, that's a raycon. So that is a buoy, and then it's giving us a raycon, and that raycon is always going away from you. So this is me, this is the center of the vessel, and away from me. So if I travel over here, that raycon is going to be pointing this way. It's always away from me. But right at the base of it, the closest point to me is where the Raycon is. That's the actual buoy that has the Raycon. So that's that C buoy, that safe watermark, whatever object it is.
Captain, how big is the range there?
We are on a 12-mile scale. Okay, and then I'm going to click. So this is the same image using, but with the AIS overlay. So now we have these little images of what has an AIS. This doesn't have an AIS. Maybe that's a buoy. Maybe it's just a small vessel with no AIS. I'm not sure. And then we also have some rings and bearing lines, which we're going to talk about in a little bit.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. And I'm sure you're going to get to this, but how, again, can you tell, like you just said, something that didn't have an AIS, how can you tell if it does and it doesn't on the screen?
The little triangle.
Triangle, okay. Yes.
So that is what we call an overlay. So your radar can overlay to your chart plot.
Mm-hmm.
Your AIS can overlay to your chart plot. Your AIS can overlay to your radar. And all of these overlays help you really use it to the best of your ability, right? That helps that situational awareness. So that little triangle symbol is what is picking up a AIS.
Yeah. Okay, I can see it. Yeah.
Very, very hard to see, I know. Okay, before we go into knobs, we're going to take a little 10-minute break here. Does anybody have any questions so far? How's everyone doing?
I mean, it's also new to me.
Yes.
You know, but like it makes sense.
Okay.
So.
And I just want to apologize. I'm totally geeking out on this and asking a buttload of questions. So I do have a question though. So you were talking about overlays. Do you ever use something like Active Captain or anything like that?
I do not in the commercial world.
Okay.
It might be common practice in the recreational.
Yeah, like
world.
cruising, it's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know like recreational, a lot of people just use their iPads. That's very common.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that is a big no-no in the commercial world.
Yeah, yeah, that's
so
true.
I wish I had that recreational experience, but I do not know.
Gotcha. I get to straddle both worlds, so it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. 10-minute break, I believe you said?
Yes, 10-minute break. Let's come back at 7:35. So yes, we only have about 20-30 more slides left. And we don't have homework this week. So like I was talking to Sabrina earlier before class, this 4-hour class is kind of designed to have that simulator time and to boot up the simulator, to work on the simulator, etc., which we are not going to be doing. So I anticipate getting out early / we're already home most weeks. So no promises, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. And again, I like to do PowerPoints, then we'll do our homework in class, but there's no homework this week. So let's dive into it so we could watch that Dodgers game. Okay. Back. Okay. Knobology. That is a Captain Ron term if I ever heard one. Have you guys, wait, did you guys have classes with Captain Ron yet? I know Lucy had radar, but okay. He's a character. He's a good guy. Okay, so we're gonna go over knobs, specifically to the or it's not even specifically because I kind of generalized it here, to the simulator. But just know that every radar unit you are going to have, the knob might be, most likely will be different, but the function behind it will be the same. So, you know, this one has almost a keyboard, and this one has like a dozen little things with some arrows. And this one has like a mouse and a clicker. So there's just so many different ways that you're going to have knobs functioning on a radar. So it's important to, whatever radar you're using, look at that user, that operator's manual, and test out these functions. See where to change it one way or another. So let's dive into it. Okay, so this is what the simulator looks like. We have a couple things that I'll point out on here. We have our range of, that's saying from us, how far away am I seeing? This one is 3 miles. Down here, we have a transmit standby button. So that is, you know, the modulator is on, the transmitter's on, but that antenna and that little TR tube isn't letting those electronic pulses out of the antenna. It is on standby. And then when you hit transmit, it starts sending out those pulses. So, so if someone is, you know, you don't want to be close, talking about radar safety, you don't want to be very close to this because it is very high electromagnetic frequencies pulsing out of this antenna. So if you are going to be working aloft or doing something near the actual antenna itself, you want to put it back on standby. A lot of times your recreational boaters will leave it on standby and only start transmitting if it gets dark or it gets foggy or they're in a very heavy congested, lots of boats area. So you always want to know, why is my radar working? It's probably not even transmitting. So you always want to start transmitting. And I'm just going to go into it because you're not going to be using this anyways. Sorry. So our basic controls, our power switch, our transmit, our brilliance. So our brilliance is literally just a dimmer. It's turning it brighter or not brighter. So during the day, you want it really, really bright. At night, you want to have it dimmed so you keep your night vision. Your gain, I think I'm going to show you some examples of gain, and I definitely have examples of a electronic bearing line, a variable range marker. So a bearing and a range. From your navigation courses, you know what those bearings and ranges are, right? So this is how we, using our EBL and VRM, how we get that data of how to get a range and bearing from an object. And then we have our kind of our tune, our controls. We have our rain clutter and our sea clutter that helps us kind of fine tune the image that we're looking at. So we are going to dive into those. Oops. Other controls we have auto clutter. I would say auto clutter typically isn't used, but auto tune definitely is.
Captain, what's an example of clutter?
Like sea chop, sea clutter, choppy waves, giving you lots of feedback, or you know, small rain giving you lots of feedback. Just things on the radar screen that are giving you little pips that aren't, you know, a vessel or a buoy or a land. It's just kind of cluttering the screen. It's giving you returns. Okay, I'm gonna skip through that. Okay, so one thing that we could turn on or off is our radar, is our range rings. So that is literally rings around the radar screen that stay constant. So we are always in the center. Typically, if you're on a 12-mile scale, your rings will be every 2 miles. So your closest ring gives you a 2-mile range around you. So anything within that ring is within 2 miles. So it gives you a very quick way of looking at distances, whether it's land, targets, vessels, whatever it is. Your radar rings can give you a very quick identifier to where what the range is. So some people like to have them on. Some people think it's too cluttered, too many lines on the screen. They want to turn them off. It's personal preference. You can turn them off or leave them on. Your electronic bearing line. So your electronic bearing line, you can move all around, and all it is from you giving you a bearing. So instead of going out and using your compass to get a bearing to an object of land, you can use your radar without even going out of the wheelhouse. So this image is what they call a tangent bearing. So you might have seen that on a chart plot exam or something that you've done. But the tangent bearing means it only hits the island or the object in typically a piece of land. Tangent bearing is used for navigation in one spot. So your tangent is if you had a circle and a line goes through it, one spot, not two and not none, just hits the arc of a circle is what tangent is. So a tangent bearing is when it just hits the very tip of a land, and you can get that direction and then easily plot that on the chart. So that is a great navigation tool for your EBL, but also just to get where bearings are of different objects, different targets, vessels around your area. You use the EBL. You can move it around quickly. Usually it's a knob or something that you're just moving around that line. Your variable range marker, so that's the other piece of navigation, is your range, right? We have a bearing and range. That's our distance. So this circle, we typically move with a knob to increase or decrease. So from us, we can measure something distance away from us, or we could keep it at 2 miles or 3 miles, or whatever we want to keep it at. We can set it, or we can measure a distance using the range marker. So again, it's just a circle that you're moving the knob to see what distance something is. A lot of times, if your radar has a cursor, so either you're moving it with arrows, like a little arrow pad, or you have an actual touch screen, or you have a mouse trackball kind of thing, the side of your radar will give you a range and bearing to wherever your cursor is. So that's a great tool to use as well, which basically gives you the same thing as a VRM or EBL. I'm going to go back to the EBL.
Captain, is your display always heads up north?
I would say the display is always north up. North up. The EBL is, regular practice, use it most for collision avoidance. With rules of the road, have you heard constant bearing decreasing range, CBDR? If something is on a constant bearing decreasing range, risk of collision exists. So your EBL really identifies, is it constant bearing, right? That's the first part of the constant bearing decreasing range saying. So if I put an EBL, there's an object out there, I'm getting a blip every like 3 or 4 scans. I don't really know, what's going on out there. I quickly want to know if there's a risk of collision or not. Risk of collision means varying, decreasing range. So I'll quickly just put an EBL of where I'm getting a blip every once in a while. And I come back, 10 minutes later or something. If that blip is still on the same EBL line, that means it had a constant bearing. Maybe it wasn't decreasing range. I didn't quite measure that. If the blip has moved forward of my EBL line, it means it's going to pass ahead of me. If it has moved behind my EBL line, it means it's going to pass astern of me. So the EBL is a very quick way to figure out risk of collision, especially if you aren't plotting it on a paper plotter, or the ARPA, you're not getting a strong signal, so it's not tracking and it's just losing it constantly. That EBL can give you, assurance. Hey, I need to be looking out for this, or it was going to be passing ahead of me or behind me. So that EBL is used for that a lot. Range marker is also used a lot for navigating. If you're in a channel, you want to stay, 7/4 of a mile to the right side of the channel. That's the lane that you want to be in. You just keep your radar range, or we also have parallel indexing right on the edge of the piece of land, and you could use it for navigation as well. So lots of different tools for your EBL and VRM. Okay. Using your range rings, your EBL and your VRM, you're just finding where something is in relation to you. And that is what we're going to be looking at when we go to our paper plot. So if you see that blip on the screen, in order to transfer it to the paper plot, you get the range and bearing from you to transfer it to the paper plot. So those are the two pieces of information that we're going to be using a lot. And how you get those is by using your EBL or VRM. And modern radars, you can just use your cursor as well. Okay, we got sound effects. Okay, so rain clutter. So if we are in, if there is a squall ahead of us, meaning a rainstorm, the electronic pulses that go out get reflected back to us, right? That water is reflecting back those electronic magnetic pulses. So how do we see through the rain? It's not impossible, but we can make the return a whole lot smaller so that we can kind of filter out those big heavy drops. And if there's a big solid something there, we could see it through the rain. So if you have your rain clutter up and it's not raining, then it's going to be really hard to see those little tiny objects because we've decreased the size of their return so much. If it is raining, it's a great tool to see through that squall to see if there's, something of concern in that area. Here's an example of what a squall is going to look like on the radar. You might just see this big blotches. So there can definitely be, some targets or something in those big squalls that we want to, see through and see what's there.
Captain, does the color indicate anything like intensity or anything?
No. The color here is that trails. So it's that history. The sweep, the newest sweep is going to be that yellow. The trails is typically blue or green. Green or yellow is like the initial one, and then typically blue is your trails. They're the history. Doppler radars that they use on, KTLA morning news, they definitely can tell the density of things, but we're just getting an image back. Okay, so this is the effect of that rain clutter, the rain clutter, which is also known as FTC. So we have a blip on the radar. Now, as we use the rain clutter, okay, didn't do it. I'm frustrated with this thing. There we go. Okay, so you can see it's a big blip and it just gets a little bit smaller when you put that rain clutter around it. So it's making all of the returns smaller. So if it's just rain, it kind of just disappears. And if it's a solid object getting a heavy return, it's still going to appear on your display, but just a lot smaller. Okay. C clutter, STC. Okay. Here we go. Let's just get all of these things here. Okay. So the C clutter is going to be, the rain clutter really affects, I would say it doesn't affect things close to you, it affects things further away. The C clutter will affect, has an effect on your minimum range. Right around you is where you're typically getting most of your C clutter. And that's where your STC filter will be most effective. So this is that choppy waves that are coming up and giving you lots of little blips around you. So this is an example of what it might look like without a C clutter on. So we get lots and lots of little things coming back and we can't really see what's near us or around us. So we use that C clutter to calm down what's coming up very close to us. We could either have auto C clutter or manual C clutter, but either one works. This is an example of a radar that is on very high gain. So we're getting lots and lots of feedback, and that C clutter has cleared out right around us, but it only goes to a certain distance. It's not going to go very, very far around us, that C clutter effect. So in order to tone this area down, I would tone the gain down. Now, the rule of thumb with gain is to, I like to turn it up not all the way, but turn it up until it looks something like this, where you're getting a lot of feedback, and then turn it down where you're just getting a couple little speckles. You don't want to turn it down all the way because you're going to be hiding those small little frequencies, but you don't want to turn it up. You can see, there's a strong target here, but then we're getting all of this other feedback, this clutter, I like to call it. So, so how I would adjust my gain is to have the screen, covered in snow, or something that looks like this, and then tune it back so it's just a couple little flecks that might be moving around here and there. And that will give you the, maximum adjustments to see those small ones, but not get too overwhelmed by too much clutter and things on the screen. So it's kind of finding that balance.
Captain? Is there anything on the right side of the screen that is of importance to you?
Oh, on
here.
You're talking about. Okay,
yeah,
so
I don't know if there's anything that you ever referred to over there. And I apologize. I was just kind of fascinated by all of the data set that was over there. I didn't know if you used it.
Yes. So on your radar, you want to be able to understand what all of this is talking about. So down here at the bottom, and again, this is going to look different on each radar that you encounter, right? I don't even know what program this is. The one I was looking at earlier was a Furuno. There's your JRC. There's Raytheon. You know, there's lots of different softwares and looks to it. But kind of this basic, we have our EBLs and our VRM. So we have EBL1, EBL2, VRM. So we could turn those on and adjust them. Down here, we had that gain, tune, your C clutter and your rain clutter. We keep our rain clutter down unless there's a squall. Our C clutter dependent, and I would say our gain is too high. I would put the gain down on this one. Different things, I guess we're going to go into it. So we have true motion or relative motion, true vector versus your relative vector. I always like to know where those are because it's a great tool to switch back and forth between true and relative. That way you get an idea of what the true course and true direction of that vessel is, where it's headed, and then what's its relative vector, which we're definitely going to get into. You know, is it headed, you know, is it a close CPA? Relatively speaking, what's its relative motion? And we're going to dive into relative motion, I think next week or week 3. We have, this is, if it had an ARPA or AIS, it has acquired these targets and it gives us the data for each target. And so this data right here, we are going to learn how to do on paper plots. So we are going to be experts of getting all of that data. And then we're going to experience a radar in person, hopefully one day you will. And you're going to be like, oh, look, it's so easy. It's just doing it all for me. You can have your AIS overlay. We have our parallel index, different sectors. I don't know, lots of different little things. What do we have here? Auto clutter. So we want to be aware if we are using an auto clutter. Okay, just want to get it through them. They can be great because it manages your picture on the radar screen for you, but the term here, the observer is unaware of the level of suppression being applied. So so you aren't really sure if maybe if you're using a lot of suppression, then you're like, hey, I know I'm using a lot of this C clutter. I need to, you know, have a really good lookout and be aware of what's around me because I have so much filter on, essentially, for that C clutter. So you just want to be aware of what it is. And a lot of times, even if you're on auto clutter, there'll be like a little bar that says how much clutter it's using. But you just want to be aware of it. Okay. There we go. Auto tune. So typically most radars are going to be auto tuned. And that is basically just the tuning has to do with the frequency of the pulses going out and the strength of those pulses. So if you're not getting enough returns, it's not like gain. It's if you're not getting enough returns, you want to adjust your tune. Yeah. Echo averaging. So that is, I was kind of explaining it earlier with that history or those trails. If I have an echo that's constantly in this spot and it's constantly having the same relative motion, I'm kind of predicting in the next, you know, sweep, it should be around here. If it's not around there, then maybe I need to, maybe it will alarm. or it's going to average out where those are, kind of like almost DRing. But it's basically just averaging out where you're getting these very weak signals to give you a bigger signal. So if you use that trail, it's essentially doing what the trail is. And I like the trail because it gives you that two-tone that you can see what its history was and what its current one is. Where your echo averaging is just going to average it out and give it to you as that green or that bold return or echo pip on the screen.
I'm not sure I understand the difference, Captain. Can you explain that again?
The difference between what? The trails and echo averaging? Okay, so trails,
Yes.
Trails is that two-toned. It gives you what has happened on the screen and then what's currently happening. This echo averaging is if you didn't have trails on at all, and it's averaging what has happened in the past and giving like a weak blip kind of a stronger return, because 3 sweeps ago it was there, and it gives it kind of a bolder picture on the screen.
Got it. Like auto tune.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to this. Okay, so a weak target or fast moving target is going to be not as predictable for your echo averaging, right? That one sweep of the radar was here, the next sweep it was all the way over here. So it's hard to track it, or the radar thinks maybe it's a new one. And that's also where you get excuse me. That's also where you get swapping, where if two contacts get very close to one another, then one can disappear and follow on another one. But that's another thing. What do we have? I don't really like this image. I'm skipping it. Okay, interference. This happens when we get interference from other radars. So we're approaching a harbor using our radar. There's probably another 10 vessels around us using their radars. So we want to make sure our radar isn't receiving interference from the other radars that are transmitting things around us. So we have interference rejection, this IR, and we can turn that on and off. I saw it, let me go back. Here, we had our interference rejection button down here at the bottom. So it's just this button that you are, basically enabling. Okay, let's go back. Okay. So applying this interference rejection can suppress those weak targets or those Raycon signals. So we just want to be aware when we're using it that it's suppressing some of those weak targets possibly. All about situational awareness, you know what I mean? Okay, other radar features, that trails, I love those trails, talk about them a lot. The trials, that is, if we have an ARPA, we can do a trial of, oh no, that's tails. Okay, trials is a different thing. Tails, trails, wakes, those are all kind of the same thing, just a different term for the same basically history of what has happened in the past. Again, each radar might have a different name for it, so you definitely want to look at that operator's manual to see what you are what the specific radar that you are looking at is referring to and what its capabilities are. So definitely look at that. And that is all I have. Let's stop my share. So that was quick. I knew it would be quick. Well, that is all I have for tonight. The homework is really just to look over that syllabus, check out Canvas, check out those course materials at the bottom, just so you can see what's available on there. And next week, we are going to introduce ourselves to the paper plot. So have your radar plotting sheets, whether you print them out using the PDF or you get them on Amazon or the Sailing Center, whatever it is, get those radar plotting sheets and your nav tools. So you'll need something to measure distance, like a pair of dividers or a compass, and something to measure angles, courses, bearings, parallel rulers, triangles, roll plotter, whatever instrument that you're comfortable with. And we will, if you're not comfortable with nav tools, we can definitely go over that. I did post in the materials my video of how to use pros and cons of each nav tool. So depending on which ones you liked, you can check out those. And that's about it. Any big questions? Yeah, go ahead, Sabrina.
Being that our class is not in person and we aren't able to like gear up the simulator, right? The radar simulator. Do you have any resources for us maybe potentially to like use elsewhere?
No, so I did not find any like, computer program or thing I could use. I went into the radar lab and tried to make some videos, but they're like silly on my iPhone.
Oh, what are those the videos that you posted on Canvas or something? There was like a link to see your videos on YouTube.
No, I haven't posted my little radar videos yet.
Okay.
My videos I do on the YouTube are basically the homeworks.
Okay.
So they're homework tutorials or nav tutorials, whatever it is on the certain objects. So during class, I'll say, oh, I recorded something about this one. We're going to do most of our homework in class, but it will be recorded so you can, if you're doing it again, keep practicing, you can go back to the video and see how I did it or follow along.
Okay. If you do think of any like type of, like, I know you said like computer program, but like, I don't know, like any like location around Southern California that has a simulator that maybe we could have access to. I don't know if there's something.
Sabrina, I just found our side business. We're gonna like come up with a home simulator.
Okay.
I was like, the simulator we have is awesome. We're just,
okay. But we just can't use it.
OCC is not allowing us in the same building. Like,
okay.
I had a hard time going there with my husband because I was like, my husband, you're gonna film while I'm gonna do stuff on the simulator. Oh. And they gave us a real hard time about it.
Okay.
So it's just, the bureaucratic.
Totally. I just wanted to like bring that up if that.
I want to say the best way is to ask around and see it on a boat.
Yeah.
Turn it on, find the Nordic Star has it.
Okay.
The Nordic Star is still down there, I'm pretty sure. Turn it on, see what it looks like, see the buttons, try it out. Okay. I don't know if what's the sailboat, the Betty?
Yeah.
I don't know if they have radar or not. I know they have electronic plotter.
I don't think the Betty has, it's got chart plotter, but not radar.
What about the Mialusha?
That I don't know about, sorry.
And I can ask Captain Perlow on Thursday. Sorry, not to take too much time of questions. I just was like, maybe there's some other type of resource.
Yeah, I would say the best resource is to find a boat and check it out.
Okay.
The simulator is going to be really cool.
Bree?
Yeah.
Captain Bree, off topic, Do you know when you're teaching celestial navigation again?
Yes, I'm teaching, we start in the summer. So last year or this year, I guess, we started like the week after the 4th of July, and I think it's give or take around that.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, I only do celestial once a year, and that's starts in the summer.
Cool. Excellent. This was good. This is a good class. I liked it.
Okay, cool.
Sorry I asked so many questions and geeked out on you.
It's all good. It's all good.
All right. Cool. Are we good?
We're good. That is all I have. So feel free to email me. I'll probably email you guys with my regular email address. So feel free to email me or contact me whenever. I'll be around. That's all.